Hello and welcome to this special webinar organised by Sarbat, but with a range of partners on coming out. So it's National Coming Out Day, and it's also National Mental Health Awareness Day, I believe. So we're joined today by a range of people from a range of backgrounds to talk about their experiences of this very sort of special and unique subject. So welcome to Coming Out Day, an interfaith perspective of the South Asian community. So my name is Kulbir. I've been a volunteer with Sarbat for a couple of years now. I'm joined by Shraddha, Kaur. So together we'll take you to this webinar. So just before we start, just a few words about what we mean by coming out and just some of the context around this term. So these are just ideas, I guess, for everybody to think about as we're going through the panel. So I guess the sort of term coming out, the question there is about what is it we're coming out about and to who? And I know sort of speaking from sort of my personal experiences, you know, it's not necessarily easy to define or to navigate. So the coming out process is quite important. Another thing we'll sort of touch on today is about the sort of religious viewpoints versus the cultural. So this is not a theological discussion. This is not really about religion per se, but it appreciates that religions are a very important part of certainly my life. And many people, you know, on the panel, but also people sort of dialing in today. But people will essentially be speaking about their personal experience. And whether or not it's a Western colonial term, so coming out, where does the term come from? And maybe there's an idea here that says coming out is, you know, before the British were there, you know, it's put us into almost a false binary where you either are out or you're not out, or you are gay or you're not gay. But where does the term coming out fit into that? And how does that fit into what our panel think? And just a reminder that these are sensitive topics. You know, they may be triggering, so just be wary of that. And if you need to reach out to us, please email us or, you know, follow us on our social channels and follow us that way. So without further ado, let's introduce you to the panels. So Pavan, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Kulbir. It's great to be here. I'm really excited. A little bit nervous about the event as well, to be honest, but really excited. How do I introduce myself? That comes straight away, the question about my identity. How do I see myself? I'll say a few things. I think I'm from Indian origin. I came here in 2004 from Rajasthan. I'm a doctor by profession. I'm a mental health professional. I'm a writer. I write blogs. I'm a cricketer, play sports. I'm a dancer, love Bollywood dancing. And yeah, I have many other identities, but one of my identities being gay. And I happen to be a person from Indian origin who is gay. So that's who I am. Thanks, Kulbir. Kulbir, you're mute.
You're muted.
Sorry, amateur error. Sorry, in no particular order. Should we go to Lokesh next? Over to you, Lokesh.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Really glad to be here. My name is Lokesh. I'm a queer person. I'm from India, from Haryana, and I've been in London for about 2 years. And yeah, really glad to be here. My pronouns are he, him, they, them. Thank you.
Thank you, Lokesh. Excellent. Matt, can we go next?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me on the panel today. My name is Mahmood-Ogston, and I'm a trustee of a charity called Nazamat Foundation. We work with parents and families to remove the barriers that prevent religious parents from accepting their LGBTQI+ children. We do school talks, we do online events, videos. We've just got a new documentary out. But what's really important is that, you know, with the work that we do, is we just try and find ways of creating a better understanding within families to allow them to learn and understand their children, to hopefully lead to more acceptance within the family. And that's me. And pronouns are he, him.
Thank you, Matt. Rahni, would you like to go next?
Hiya, I'm Rahni. I've been attending Sarbat for a while, a couple of years, I think, various social events. I'm a lesbian, Punjabi, Sikh. I've been out, I'm constantly being out. So I've been out about maybe 30 years. I'm a single parent, got 2 adult children. What else? And I work in the violence against women and girls sector, and I live in London. That's me.
Thank you very much, Rahni. And Sabrina, over to you.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. My name is Sabrina Kaur, and I am a proud parent of my gay son Sherwin. I am a huge ally of the LGBTQ plus community, and I volunteer for 2 LGBT charities, one in India and the second one in the UK. I spend a lot of my time on social media supporting and championing the rights of the LGBTQ plus individuals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. Thank you, panel. So just a little bit in terms of the structure. So we have 3 questions for the panel. So we have approximately between an hour and an hour and 15 for them.
Sorry, Kulbir, I think we missed Osman.
Oops, apologies. Osman, sorry, you're not on my screen.
No, that's fine.
Sorry, Osman, over to you, apologies.
Yeah, I'll just quickly introduce myself. So my name is Osman. I am a gay Muslim man who volunteers for an organisation called Hidayah. So our mission at Hidayah is to provide support and welfare for LGBTQI plus Muslims so that we can promote social justice, education around the queer Muslim community, and counter discrimination, prejudice and injustice. Thank you.
Thank you, panel. And apologies, Osman, for that oversight. You just disappeared off my screen, but I've just expanded my screen now. Just a few words in terms of the structure. So we have between an hour and an hour and 15 for the 3 questions. And then after the 3 questions, there's a chance for you guys to put your questions and your thoughts to the panel. So we'll do it like that, I think. So I'll hand over now for the first question, which Shraddha will ask of the panel. So over to you, Shraddha.
Thank you. Do you want to move to the slide while I ask my question? Thank you, panel. That was wonderful for introductions. I've learned a few little bits of nuggets of information about all of you in those introductions. My first question to go around the table for all of you is, what does the term coming out mean to you? Shall we go to Pavan first?
Thanks, Shraddha. What is coming out to me? I think I'll take you guys on a little journey of my experience, my life. It starts from when I was 13-year-old boy. Very first time feeling a little bit confused about my sexuality and sexual orientation. But just know that I can't share it with people. Growing up in Rajasthan in India, there were a lot of kind of, well, first of all, there was no language at the time. There was no role model to refer to. There was nobody out, celebrity or people to connect with. And there were lots of judgment around about trying to fit in the conformity. And if you don't fit in, then you don't have a language. And as a result, I was very confused. What's happening with me? 10 years down the line, things changed. I was still confused, but more isolated and lonely, not knowing where I belong and where I fit in. Still confused, trying to find the language. And then eventually I managed to find the word of internet and got to know about my own identity, found a language, little bit courage, and then gradually came out to my work colleagues, my friends and family. And it had been really mixed experience. 10 years further forward, I'm now very comfortable about who I am with regards to my sexual orientation. I'm more relaxed, I'm more confident. And what I actually learned about the coming out has been, for me, is a journey where I have lost a few things for sure. Lost people who probably couldn't connect with me or couldn't see me who I am. But I also gained a lot of people who really saw me who I am. I gained acceptance, validation, and authenticity, I guess. One thing what has been for me in this journey is that my journey is not coming out. It was more inviting in. as now people talking about it. I never came out announcing myself to the world, here I am, I have arrived kind of stuff. It was very much like inviting people gradually, starting from a friend of mine to then moving to work colleagues and so on. So in this journey, I learned that coming out for me is not a linear process. It's a journey. For me, acceptance of family was very important, but I realized that it has been not as I imagined and hoped for, and they are still in their journey. It can be very challenging. I realized not everyone's journey is the same. And another thing I learned about coming out for me is that people should not be feeling pressure or pressurized to come out in some way, or inviting in. Even inviting it should not be pressurized. So that's what it is in a very brief summary about what's been for me, what coming out has been.
Thank you. I love the switching it around to say inviting in instead of coming out. That was a nice way of putting it. Thank you. Over to you, Rahni.
Yeah, I like that as well. Inviting, because you're constantly inviting. So when I made that sort of remark, I'm constantly coming out. You're constantly inviting, and like I said, I came out, almost 30 years ago, way back when my children were little babies, and it was, it was a very different world. There weren't many South Asian women that I could connect to that were out, and when I did find some, I kind of held on to them. Yeah, you're like me, great. But it was really, really hard because whatever the scene was, it was predominantly white. It wasn't inviting, and I had to kind of come out there. I had to tell them that I was a lesbian. They wouldn't let you in, so, and there weren't spaces. You had to kind of create your own space. And that was a challenge. So going to Asian or African events, that's where you would go. You'd go to a place where it would be Black LGBT. You wouldn't go to mainstream because mainstream wouldn't invite you. And coming out was a challenge, Pavan, you touched upon it in terms of family. My family mean a lot to me and always have. And coming out to them wasn't what they wanted to hear. Coming out to my mom was the death of me, actually. We had a very estranged relationship. For many years, we didn't connect, we didn't talk. And it's over the years, my mom kind of got to a point she actually understood me and accepted. However, but it wasn't a conversation that I could talk about. It wasn't that I could bring my partners, my lovers home and say, Mom, this is my new girlfriend. That couldn't happen. She would ask, oh, how is your friend? And I say, my friend is very well, Mom. And that was it, So coming out was a real challenge. So, yeah. And there's this thing about, like I said, I'm constantly having to say who I am in different spaces, never mind just in my family space. But if I'm somewhere, people will assume that I am heterosexual, because I have, if I say my child or my granddaughter, they will just make that big assumption, or the way I look. And so it's like, well, actually, no, I'm not. I'm a lesbian. And then that's sort of like, whoa, okay. In some places it's okay, some places it's not. So it's a constant. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's as you said, and I think Kulbir said this as well in the beginning, it's a process, isn't it? It never sort of ends. So yeah, thank you for that. Lokesh, shall we go to you next?
Sure. Hi. So for me, coming out is, I would say, like, I'm still in process of coming out, which everyone is, I think. But so, like, me growing up in a small town in India where my family is quite conservative and they carry the patriarchy that is passed down from the culture to them, and sort of for coming out for me was coming out to myself and sort of understanding who I really was and what was taught to me. So understanding that is the process that I'm still trying to understand all about myself. And then also it's about the relationships that I have with other people. So I've been sharing about my sexuality, my orientation, my gender, those kind of things with people that I feel comfortable with, and the field where I feel that kind of information is required in the relationship. So that has been the journey that I am still on right now.
Excellent, thank you. It never stops, but good luck. Thank you. Can I go to Osman next?
Hi. So what does coming out mean to me? So for me, it's actually quite an emotional thing for me to think about, because I'm not out. So I still live with my family, and it's difficult because for me, I think about the person I would be if I could be out and could be sort of more open and honest with everybody around me. So this idea that I sometimes imagine what I'd be like as a person. So yeah, it's a difficult one for me. I really don't care what people think of me, so I don't have an issue about coming out. But what I do worry about is how my coming out would react. The reaction would be to my family and friends in my community.
Yeah, thank you. So it's not just about one individual. It feels like it's a much bigger concept in how you're looking at it. Thank you. Can I go to Matt next?
Thank you. So I think, for me, coming out is one of the hardest things that many of us will ever do in our lives, because in that moment when we come out, we don't know how our family, particularly our parents, will react to us in that moment. In that one brief moment of saying who you really are, who your parents really gave birth to, in that moment, your whole life, your whole happiness, your whole existence in your family environment could just disappear. And the reason why I'm really here today is the fact that my own fiance Naz, my fiance of 13 years, sadly in 2014 he was confronted about his sexuality for the first time, and it was something that Naz really never thought that he could do. It's something that he always wanted to do, but he firmly believed that he had to put his coming out to his parents into a box, and that box should never be opened, because he believed he couldn't deal with the consequences of that box being opened. And sadly, that box was opened. He was confronted about it. And sadly, the reason why our charity, Nazamat Foundation, exists is sadly 2 days later, Naz, I won't go into details, but sadly, Naz is no longer here because of that confrontation. And so it's really important to understand that, coming out, the way I see it, it's a journey, not a destination. Coming out, it might take years, it might even take decades. You may never fully get to that place where you feel that you're completely out to completely everyone, because it's not safe to do so. I think it's a deeply personal process that should never be rushed. It should never be taken lightly, and proper precautions should be in place if you are fearing the way that your parents or your wider family may react when you come out. For example, coming out, if you're not financially independent of your parents and your family, if you fear what your parents might say to you or do to you, then I think it's advisable. In fact, it's highly recommended that you don't come out to your parents until you're able to sustain yourself and live independently and financially away from your parents. I'd like to live in a world where we didn't have to come out, where the phrase didn't exist, but sadly we do. And I think it's really important that, we have events like this where we can share our coming out experiences and actually learn from each other, to learn, what to do or perhaps what not to do. But together, I think, talking like this openly, I think it's a really important way of becoming stronger within ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And that really speaks to how there might be very real consequences. It's not something that you just sort of do off the bat of a moment. So yeah, thank you, and thank you for bringing us to remember Naz in this process. Sabrina, can I come to you next?
Yes, certainly. I think that it begins with a moment of truth. It is a presentation of a human being in their truest form. And it is at that moment the critical role of a parent also kicks in to give reassurance of their unconditional love and support throughout their journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Short but beautifully put. I could not have put it better. And that's the spirit we need with all our families around us as support mechanisms. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll hand it over to Kulbir for the next question.
Thank you so much for that. That was brilliant. Just slightly in awe of all your experiences there. And it's just a reminder, I guess, as well, that everybody on the panel, so we're from different backgrounds. So we have slightly older people, we have parents, we have people from the Sikh community, the Hindu community, the Muslim community. So it's just a reminder for me as well, I guess, for you guys, about how varied and sort of intersectional, I guess, this issue is. So that's been really interesting. So question number 2 for the panel, what advice would you give to others based on your experiences? So let's go to Pavan again with that. So Pavan, over to you. What advice would you give to others based on your experiences?
Thanks, Kulbir. It's a complex one because everyone's journey is different from other person. But there are a few things which I will go from my own experience. The term actually I came across inviting in earlier, which I mentioned as well, which was how my journey was. And I think something I could share there, some of my experiences around this. So first of all, as I said before, I think in coming out should not be pressurized, or people should not feel pressure from anybody around them. And it's from within themselves. I think lots of evidence talk about understanding your own sexual orientation identity is psychologically beneficial. So there's this process, there's a benefit of recognizing this is helpful. But I believe more it's an internal recognition, rather than external validation, which is important. So I think I would invite people to go through this process of understanding orientation, but you don't need to necessarily announce to the world for seeking validation and so on. I would suggest risk-assessed situation. I think Matt alluded to some of these points, especially with the South Asian community and the lots of kind of intersectionality we have, which is religion, culture, the group we are living in, financial independence, or your kind of position. I mean, I can't even think of actually how a person growing up in a village, let's say a woman in the village, would feel in terms of coming out comparison to, let's say, a man who has slightly different position in Indian culture. So risk assessment is important. I would suggest finding support and connection is quite important, to look for who are your kind of support networks around. It could be friends, family, for young people, teachers, and so on, to connect with them. And do it actually, again, inviting in is important. Do it in a gradual process when you're ready, and to the person you feel like most connected with, and seek some sort of confidentiality and reassurance as well. And the other person who needs to meet with that person in that sense, that's quite important. Be prepared for some of the kind of different responses from people. So when people coming out, then one of the perception of coming out is that everybody would be fine or everybody would be against. But my experience has been that it's mixed. Sometimes I was shocked to know that there was no response from people, while I was expecting them to either be angry or upset. Or there were responses which came long after I came out. So it's just a journey which other person would be having while you are having this journey as well. So be prepared for responses, what you hear from. Find the right organizations, support if you can. So we're hitting NAS and MET locally is quite helpful. Hidayah, we have Gay Indian Network, JIN, Sarbat, the organization which can signpost to you to write kind of organizations and the people as well. I think the key thing is actually finding the right supportive environment and not feeling pressurized about coming out. It's more inviting you in process, which I would suggest. And again, like people said, it's an ongoing process. So, but I also want to say that it has been, in my case, have been really helpful process to really eventually come to a place where I'm no longer confused. I'm very much aware of what my identity is and where my tribe or social connection and networks are. So that's just some of those thoughts.
Thank you, Pavan. Really interesting. So the thing there about sort of not feeling under pressure to come out, and that seems to be a really important point, but how do we sort of almost build up that courage or that resilience? Do you just want to sort of follow up a little bit on that?
So if I think about my own journeys, actually, it's, as I said, it was never a linear process. It was lots of things. As I think what Matt alluded is my independence was an important part of building resilience. Once I felt I was financially more independent, I think that gave me the strength of taking the next step. When I was financially dependent, alongside the things I mentioned, there was no language, no connection, so on. It was very difficult in that sense too. And therefore I didn't come out then. I think I came out long after, when I have come to the UK and I started to get to work and get financial income. So I became much more independent in that sense. So that was part of the kind of journey. The other thing is actually all this process is knowing that talking to people who have been in this journey is helpful. Events like these actually quite helpful to get an insight, and knowing that you're not alone in this process. That's a very important thing. That there are lots of people who are like you and who have had similar journeys, and connect with them. These are all small kind of, some of the kind of, well, small but very important and major parts of building resilience as well.
Sure, thanks, Pavan. Over to Rahni. Rahni, what advice would you give to others based on your experiences?
Well, I think in terms of what Matt touched on and Pavan's touched on, it has to be a choice. You know, you have to feel that's what you want to do, and never ever feel pressured to come out. Never ever, and you know, it's about being authentic, being true to who you are, but at what cost? And I think that's what's, you have to weigh up, at what cost? What have I got to lose? What have I got to gain? And it's a really tough one, because in terms of my experience as a woman and coming out as a lesbian, it was not easy. Not only did you have the sexism, patriarchy, the racism, homophobia, all those things played a part. So it's like I had to make a choice in terms of, am I going to be true to who I am? Or am I just going to hide? And it was a really hard one, because I had to work out, well, if I come out, I lose my family. And I lost my family for a number of years. I was not connected to them at all. I wasn't connected with the community. And it's taken years and years of healing to sort all of that out. And I don't know if I have advice that's going to be like, this is what you need to do. Because we're all saying, you know, risk assess, look at, is it your choice? You know, is it going to serve you? I don't know. But then also in terms of what Sabrina said, you know, about being true, being real, being who you are. Can I be the whole of me? You know, me being out, you know, whatever out is, or, you know, is being the whole of me, except the complete person who I am, the complete woman who I am, you know, my sexuality, my identities, everything. And how do you do that? You know, when your family has a particular standpoint or a particular belief, or their faith comes in the way, how do you do that and still feel safe? You know, and then you've got, like, in terms of the caste system within the South Asian community, the caste system exists. How do you come out if you're a Dalit community? You're from that particular community. How are you going to come out? Have you got the resources? Pavan touched upon that. You know, it's making sure that you have the financial resources. As a woman, how the hell are you going to do that? You know, in the UK, in a Western concept, you know, to some degree you can. You may have access to education, you may have access to jobs, you'll have certain accesses that will allow you certain privileges, but being in another country, being, you know, I know certain members of my family, if they wanted to be out, there's no way on hell are they going to be out. You know, how are they going to navigate their safety to be them completely? So I really think it's a choice you need to make, and ensure that you have the safety, you have the networks, you have the support. And that's the most important thing, that you need the support, you know, and you've got to risk, you've got to sort of assess, is this the right thing to do right now, you know?
Thank you, Rahni.
Yeah.
A few key points there: risk, support, and community. And it's a really interesting point about sort of almost minorities within minorities and where we lie in that. And on this call, we have, you know, we've got different religious groups. So even our own experiences are different. But it's interesting about the point about the Dalit community, for example. Just a reminder to everybody that if you have any questions, if you want to type them in the question box, and we can get to them at the end. So that same question to Lokesh. Lokesh, what advice would you give to others based on your experiences?
So I think like most of the things that I wanted to say have already been covered by everyone else. Like what I feel about coming out is that it's more important to first understand your own identity and your own self.
Sure.
Before expressing it to someone else. And I think like that's what would be the first priority I would suggest for someone. But other than that, I think also, as Pavan mentioned earlier, being financially independent is quite an important thing as well. But also, like, along with being financially independent, I think being emotionally independent as well, where you have your support network of your friends and your family, building a support network who you are comfortable with, who accept you as who you are, is quite important. So having all that support network would make a lot of difference before someone decides to come out to anyone. And also, coming out is not like a one-off thing. I believe it's like it's different based on like different relationships and different circumstances everyone would be. So coming out to my parents would be very different for me, because they do not even have a vocabulary to understand what queerness means, what gay means. The only word they understand is transgender. That is the Hinjara community in India. So that's what they would associate it with. Whereas my friends who are around my age, who have access to internet and all sort of things, do understand that, but they are misinformed. So I think setting up the base where you come out, so making like a common vocabulary and common understanding of what it actually means, and that's when you could share that you could actually you like, at least you need to be able to have a foundation to able to come out to someone. Yeah.
Thank you, Lokesh. I like the point about having the language. So we have the language for these terms and of these experiences, and that helps, I guess. That same question to Osman.
Yeah, I think I agree with what the rest of the panel have said. I also think that it's important to, the sad reality is for many of us, our families, we don't receive that unconditional love. And so it's important to create your own family, i.e. make friends, connect with people who accept you and don't judge you as a person. So I think my advice would be to try and look at your own sort of adopted family of friends that are there to support you and give you that help that you need.
Thank you, Osman. Do you go to Matt? Matt, do you want to take that question? What advice would you give to others based on your experiences?
Yes, thank you. My main advice would be, first of all, not to rush and not to feel any pressure that you need to or should come out. It's I think, like many of us have said already, it's a personal choice. But one thing that we've done at our charity is to try and map out the coming out process. It's a process that doesn't apply in all situations, but sometimes it can help both the child or the LGBTQ individual and the parent with the coming out process to understand there are different stages and each person might be at a different stage. So I just want to quickly go through, and it doesn't apply in all situations, so I'm not saying it applies to everyone, but in a lot of cases it can apply and it can be helpful. So the first step is really an awareness that we might be different from other people in the family, or different from other people in our school, or different from people in our group, or from a parent's perspective. That awareness might be that they think that there is something different with their child, but they can't quite understand what that difference is. And then after that stage of awareness, it may move into a period of denial, where the LGBTQ individual almost rejects or denies the fact that they are different from everyone else in the family because they fear what the outcome might actually be. And from a parent's perspective, it might also be the same. The denial that their child is different, the fact that their son or their daughter or their child just seems different from the other ones in the family, they may want to deny and push that thought to the back of their mind because, as some of the other speakers have said, often parents, they do know their child more than, perhaps we realise, but quite often those parents don't want the fact that their child might be queer. They don't want it said out loud, because by saying it out loud, it becomes real. And it's no longer just a thought in the back of their mind. After denial, we as LGBT people, we might go in a period of mourning where we're actually mourning the loss of not being heterosexual. And that might seem controversial, but what I mean is we might be mourning the loss of not being able to have that wedding for our family in the traditional way that they want. A parent might be mourning the loss of their child becoming all of the things that they dreamed that they would become if they were straight. So there might be a period of mourning where you're mourning the loss of something you either thought you were or a parent thought their child was. But then after that period of mourning, often it can go into a stage of tolerance where individuals tolerate the fact that they might be different. They tolerate they might be LGBTQ+, or a parent might be tolerating, in other words, putting up with the fact that their child is different. And that's not acceptance, but that's just putting up with, in other words, it's not hating them, it's not rejecting them, but it's just putting up with their existence as being different in the family. But then after, if we can all work through that process in a really, very constructive way, and this might take a long period of time, but then we can move into a stage of acceptance, where finally the parent might start to begin to accept the child that they're giving birth to for who they were born to be. As an LGBTQ+ person, we might finally move into a stage where we start to accept ourselves and embrace ourselves for being different. Where we feared being different before in the earlier stages, now we're actually accepting that we're different. And then that can move into the next stage, which is stage 6, which is pride, being proud of who we are. Being able to go out into pride marches, being able to, join panel events, be able to go and speak out proudly in the community. And, for example, for parents, being proud of their child and being able to stand in public, very proud of the child they're giving birth to. And I think after that stage, I think the final stage of coming out is really either for the individual or the parent, is the understanding that you have the power to help other people. And I think that's really important, that where you're in a strong position yourself, where you're proud of who you are and the child you're giving birth to, then I think it's really important that kind of that privilege and that love and that hard work that you've gone through is spread to other people one day, so that they might join you in that place where you can be accepted. And like I said, it's a very general process, and it's not going to apply to a lot of people. But I think just being able to kind of visually see in stages, it can sometimes help and give people hope to know that if they can just progress to the next stage, which might take years, then there is hope and a positive way forward. Because often coming out, it's chaotic, it's chaos. There's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety, there's lots of sadness. So I think it's really important that we are able to focus on a positive way forward, however long that journey might actually be.
Thanks, Matt. Really interesting points about sort of parent-child relationships there. It just sort of segues quite nicely into a comment we've had on the chat, which is somebody's mentioned that they worry that the parents won't be okay with their sexuality. My worry is that it will kill them. So actually, it's a thing where maybe children might be afraid about their parents doing them damage, but actually children thinking that they might do damage to their parents. So just on that point, so a neat little segue to the parent, I guess, to Sabrina. What are your thoughts on that question?
I have several. Thank you so much.
Please share.
Okay, so the first one that I would like to talk of is even before your child comes out, it is important to cultivate accepting and loving environments. And the thoughts that I bring to you today are the ones that we tried and tested in our own home, even before Sherwin came out to us. So I can tell you they work. But when I talk of cultivating accepting environments, I used to spend a lot of time with my children watching, say, movies. And, we used to talk about the show after it finished. And this is what Sherwin told me after he came out to me. He said, Mom, remember the times we used to watch movies together and we used to talk about them after they finished? He said, our discussions were always how it talked of equality, acceptance, love, joy and diversity. He said, and that gave me a message, although I didn't quite voice it out in that time, that perhaps home is a safe place that I can come out in, because these people give that message. Also, he said, while growing up, he often heard me say, refrain from making comments like, Shannon is a ladies' man, or say, Joey, do you have a girlfriend? Sort of questions. He said, because that created a space for him to understand that, many children feel when questions like that come up, they don't fit in those spaces. He said, but in our house, we didn't practice that. So he felt it was normal to be who he was if he felt differently. So I think being conscious of the phrases you use, the questions you ask, and the comments you make is very, very important. Then going forward, when I suppose the reaction you give to your child when he comes out, no matter what the thought in your head may be, it is very important to not say it out loud. It could splinter the trust and have very damaging repercussions on your child. If you need time out to absorb this, to digest it, whatever, you can tell your child that, I need to know more about it. I need time out. And they will give it to you because they know you want to support them, The very important thing we did when Sherwin came out, because I was a parent that didn't know much about the LGBTQ, I was talking to my doctor friends, learning and growing every time. So Sherwin made it easier for me when he came out. I listened to him, created space for him to talk and for him to be the center of solutions. I only used to ask, what can I do to help? And he used to tell me. And I made mistakes along the way. But what Sherwin made me realize is that it's okay. I understand you come from a genuine space, so it's okay. We'll work this out together. And I think no matter how much of negativity you may hear, no matter how fearful you are, put it aside. Pay attention to your child. He is your gift. He is what you should take care of, and not other people's opinions. That is my take as a parent.
Just a follow up to that, Sabrina. Is it possible just to sort of mention a few words about this issue of shame? So it's come up in the as one of the questions on the chat. So how have you dealt with the issue of shame, which society might say that there's shame involved in these issues? What's your response to that?
That there was shame.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, we ignored that. Our priority was our child. We didn't think of it as shameful. We didn't. Sherwin is somebody, when he was born, he was not expected to survive. I prayed for this child's life. And yeah, I had a gift. It was mine, and I wanted to look after it. I didn't want people's opinions putting him down. There was no shame. And Sherwin told me, because he had my support, nobody crossed him. Perhaps in the initial stages, as you know, Sherwin is deaf. So he didn't really always hear what people had to say about him. It was us, his elder brother, his younger brother, and me that heard, and we stood up for him. And eventually, people faded into the background. They didn't try to shame him. We were there, standing up and fighting for him.
That's really inspirational, Sabrina. Thanks so much for that. So we take you now to the third question. So Shraddha, would you like to take this question?
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Over to you.
All right. Our third question, and this is our final question for all of you before we open it out to questions from the audience. I already see we've got a few. And that's my final question. How can parents, friends, or allies support people on their journeys? And how would you build that? So I think we've seen the support networks and the concept around that come up several times. So how can people support people on their coming out journeys? Should we go back to Pavan and circle back around?
Sure, Shraddha, thanks. I can say a few things about this from my experience, actually. I remember when I first came out to my friends, and this was when I had come to the UK. It was only 6 months down the line, and it was mostly a group of other doctors' friends, and most of them were married and in straight relationships. And when I came out to them, nobody said anything. And within 6 months, most of them actually stopped, invited me to the events and include me in those things. And I do feel like that was quite difficult. And in that sense, the journey, eventually I realized that I will have to find my own tribe, like some of the panelists have already said, like Osman mentioned as well, that finding your own family, your friends is important. But when it comes to what people can do, I think the first thing I would say, create a space for trust. Of trust. And the first thing is that the person who's sharing is, give them reassurance of confidentiality, that what they are sharing is until they are ready to talk about it, that space is private and between them. So the trust and confidentiality is important thing. Give a kind of open mind and listening ear, and without any judgment. Just hear what they are saying. And I think Sabrina is a great example here, providing that space, what she experienced with her journey with her son, and that's incredibly powerful. And I wish my mom had that space with me, and how I craved for that. And I still find it so difficult to talk to her, because it seems like either she's listening to me or she's thinking about what she's going to say. Either she's talking or she's thinking what she's going to say next to me, but not really hearing what I'm saying. So I think it is important, just hear it out. The other thing is actually, you're not going to know the answers of everything if you first time have come across somebody sharing this, and it's okay. Like, again, going back to Sabrina's example, you will make mistakes, and it's okay, as long as there is a kind of trust between you and the person sharing this with you, that this is a safe space. And if we go back, if we make mistakes, we'll come back, have another discussion, and work it out together. But I really liked what Sabrina mentioned. It is about working this together. And I think that's the thing, whether you are friends, parents, or allies, whoever it is, make the other person feel that they are not alone. That's the most important thing. I think that what I experienced, such a loneliness for so many years on this topic, that was the killer in some ways and root of my struggle. As long as, and you don't have to actually go to every single meeting with me or be there, but even knowing that this person is there There is one friend I can go back to. There is one family member I can go back to. There is one organization I can go back to. That itself is a huge, huge support. So I think working things together, creating the space, trusting and confidentially, these are some of the things comes to my mind.
Excellent, thank you. Just as you said it, it reminded me of something, and I'm just going to share very briefly. You said that just because a friend is inviting you into their journey or their identity, that doesn't mean it gives you a license to talk about it with other people. So I think I had some friends who said, oh, you're talking to me about it, so clearly you're ready, and they could talk to other people about it. And I think just reminding everybody that that's still, you're breaking confidentiality there. So just, yeah.
That's exactly happened with me, Shraddha. First time I told my friend I was going to a party later on in the evening, and arrived in the party where lots of my friends were there, knowing that she had told everybody there already. I wouldn't recommend that experience. It was tough. And then I realized that I didn't get the chance to say it to the way I wanted to say.
Yeah.
And that's my personal journey as well. But I think, but that's a mistake. I mean, if people come back and say, well, I made a mistake, and have a talk about this, then that's okay too as well. As long as, for me, it was better. But I think the confidentiality and trust is very, very, very important. It's a very sensitive subject for me. It has been very, very sensitive and personal subject. And I can imagine for everybody.
Yeah. Thank you. Rahni?
Right, what would I say? I think Sabrina touched upon it amazingly, and it was about the process. The conversations start way early, before anyone decides or ever decides to come out. You know, if you're saying you're allies, if you're saying you're, you know, open to anything, any possibility, you know, you start those conversations. You do not make an assumption that your child is heterosexual. That's where you start. You know, you don't start that you have a boy child and that boy child's going to get married and breed loads of boys. Yeah. You know, you don't do that. And you, again, with a girl child, you do not do that she's going to get married and have hundreds and hundreds of boys, because we don't need no women. Yeah. You know, it starts way, 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 way back. You know, you have those conversations about life, experience, journey, being honest, being open. You start that way back. And I loved it the way Sabrina said it. I'm not doing it justice, but that's how you do it. You know, and if you're an ally, you're there. You're there. You don't just there for the partying, the clubbing. You're there to have those conversations. So when you're in your community, in your family, around people, around your peers, and they're saying things that are homophobic, that are transphobic, that are lesbophobic, they're saying horrendous things, you don't stand there and accept it or you walk away. You challenge it. You don't have to be LGBTQ to challenge oppression. So if you're allies, you need to be doing that. Just a thing, yeah. But, you know, it starts way before anyone decides to come out. Yeah.
Thank you. And it's all about building that support way back before, and building that confidence to even allow somebody to have that confidence to say, right, I can say this, and not suffer for saying it. Yeah. Thank you. Lokesh?
Yeah, so like the way I see it is like, someone's gender and someone's sexuality is a very personal thing that affects them in a very big way. And if someone decides to share that with you, then it is an important thing for you to listen to them rather than judging them in a way. So a couple of times that, for example, one of friends that I came out to, his first reaction was like, oh, I used to make these homophobic jokes. I was like, yeah, I ignored them. But then his reaction was like, oh, should I keep making those jokes? Because if I don't make those jokes, then it would seem like an odd thing. And like, I think that was a quite weird thing for me to like go through that. Like, I think like having some, the intent of like listening rather than sharing your own opinion on that at the initial stage, I think is quite important, because I think it's like that moment for someone is a very important moment, and being sensitive to how you respond to that makes a lot of difference to someone's experience. I think that is one of the very important things for me.
Thank you. Thank you. It's that trust. We keep coming back to that sense of support and trust. I'll take it to Osman. We've taken away the screen share, but if you need reminding, the question is around how can people support people who are coming out on their journeys?
So for me, I think I agree with what everybody on the panel has said, but the one thing I kind of want to touch upon is about raising awareness. That's within the community, within the queer community, within the Asian community, and events like these are really powerful because I'm getting to hear lived experiences. And I've taken so much from Rahni's story, from Pavan, and from Lokesh as well, and Sabrina. And it's important that within our communities, that we have these kind of events. They're so powerful, and just listening to people's stories will allow other people to break down negative barriers and attitudes that are just wrong. So I think that's amazing to have this type of event, and we need more role models within our communities.
Exactly, visibility and representation, but only if you're ready. Thank you. Shall I take it to Matt?
Thank you. Yes. So I think friends and our allies can really help by, first of all, celebrating our differences, and then doing as much as they can to then normalize those differences. Because I think it's really important, where it's possible, to drip feed positive information, factual information, but sadly also tragic stories with families, so they can actually really understand the human impact of what happens when parents don't accept their children. Because I think if we can normalize the language and kind of challenge that feeling that I think all of us have as humans, when you first hear of something for the first time in your whole life, or you see something for the first time in your whole life, often it's there's a feeling within us that's, some people might be shocked, some people might be surprised, some people might be amazed and excited, but that feeling of that newness, I think it needs to be addressed within family environments. And I know it obviously can't happen in some families, but what I'm trying to say is that where we can kind of challenge that shock of hearing about an LGBTQI plus person, where it can just be a normal part of the conversation that goes on in the TV, on the radio, and having events like this, and also sharing our stories and information on different platforms. Some people will listen to radio, some people watch TV, some people will read poetry, books, magazines, dramas, theatre shows, as many different platforms as possible. So this language becomes just kind of an acceptable thing that just happens in the background. Things like Coronation Street, for example. A couple of years ago, they had the very high-profile storyline, where they had their first, lesbian Muslim on the street. What was so important about that was that in millions of homes, that conversation, this conversation, was being had in the background while families were eating their dinner. It was a prime time show, and I think the more things like that can happen within family environments, particularly I'm talking from our allies and our relatives within the family, if they can, if we're not strong enough to do this ourselves, because quite often we might not be strong enough, but if our stronger allies in the family who are not queer, who can have those conversations on our behalf, and have them over a long period of time, where it might take months or it might take years, but get the rest of the family just comfortable hearing some of these words which describe us. I think we just need to challenge that stigma more by just normalizing it and just making it just a non-event within the family to talk about.
Yeah, thank you. That's sort of how conversation started in my family as well. I remember this show in India called Satyamev Jayate, and they did I don't know how many, I see some nods among the panel. Yes, you know that. They talked about gender and sexuality, and it was such a Sunday midday show. The entire family is watching, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening. So I remember that being mainstream spaces and bringing those conversations there. Yeah, I agree. Our final panelist for this final question, Sabrina, shall I come to you?
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to speak again. But frankly, after what I hear everybody say, I think you've rounded it up, and I have nothing more to add. I am learning and growing as an ally, as a parent of an LGBTQ child, and thank you for this opportunity of allowing me to be here. So, I get to learn and grow every day. Thank you.
Can I just add something to Sabrina's, if Sabrina doesn't mind? I think something that Sabrina did this year, which is how I first met Sabrina. Sabrina did, she answered the question by taking action. In July, Sabrina took part in Out and Proud Parents Day, where she very graciously, she was interviewed. Her interview was recorded on video, and then that video was shared by tens of thousands of people all around the world, so that more parents could actually be inspired by the way that Sabrina talks and behaves towards her own family and the community. So I think, Sabrina is living proof of how, parents should behave and do things in public to support the LGBT community. So thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you, Matt.
I'll echo that. Thank you, Sabrina. And thank you to the rest of the panel for being patient with our questions. Should we go to our Q&A? Kulbir, you want to take the first one?
Sure. Just having a quick scan of the Q&A section. Quite a few themes come out. So I think the theme of racism, which we can sort of probably get to maybe in a second, perhaps. But I just want to pick up on this point about the Western concept of coming out. So we have sort of Sabrina, who's from India, and a few panelists that were sort of brought up in India. Do you think sometimes we do conform to this Western concept of coming out? And if so, how? So in my mind, it'd be things like, you sit your parents down over a nice meal, you tell them you're gay, and then your parents will either cry or cry tears of joy, hopefully. And then it's all sort of flowers and roses and butterflies after that. But that's not always the case. Is there an Eastern perspective to this? Did you want to come back in on that, Sabrina or Lokesh, perhaps? So I guess the question is, are we made to conform to a Western way of coming out? That's the question, I guess.
Lokesh, anything?
Yeah, I think, like, particularly in my case, I come from a small town in India, and it's a very conservative environment. So, and also they don't really have a vocabulary or anyone they can refer to who they might see as a queer person. And that's not just limited to people from much older generation, like my parent generation, but like people from my generation as well. The only point of reference for them was Bollywood movies like Dostana, or like very homophobic representation that they saw, and their idea of someone who's queer was that. And I think, like, in West, you assume from start that the person would know what that actually means. So if someone is coming out, they would understand what that, like, not completely understand, but like they would have like slightly an understanding of that. But I think with, in my case, and like a lot of other people as well, I think that is not there. And that is only there only in like the big cities. For example, if you look at like Delhi, Bombay, those kind of cities. But in the smaller cities, they don't really have any context of that. Yeah.
I don't know if you want to come in at that point, Pavan. Do you have anything to add to that about coming out being a Western?
I feel like one of the things about the difference between the Western or society and Indian culture or South Asian culture is the individuality against the social kind of identity. And while coming out is actually encouraged in Western culture, is because the Western culture always have promoted the individuality in some ways. But that doesn't fit into the culture I came from, or many for South Asian community. I think for one person to see an individual separate from family is just not how we were brought up. I remember from very early age, it was all about family. It was all about communities, neighbors. It was not like our own family existed separate from others. We never needed to take or book an appointment who to go and see, and we always just back doors and just said hello auntie or uncle or whatever it is. And that continued throughout time as well. So I think it puts a lot of pressure on South Asian person to actually then conform to that kind of narrative or story as well, because it's actually a assumption that the person is separate from everybody else as well. And often there's a pressure for a person to see that it may be the whole family is coming out to everybody else. And that's huge for that person to take that pressure, because we can't separate ourselves from the family and society we live in often. And it's a really overwhelming pressure for them, for individuals as well. So I think that definitely needs to be recognized. I do feel that recognition of sexuality or sexual orientation was an important part of my journey and my actually acceptance, but it was more internal journey, which I needed to do more than external journey. I still decide who I come out to, who I don't, always do the risk assessment and so on. I don't need to go and announce to 100 people or so on as well. But knowing that this is who I am is important for part of my psychological well-being. And then I make a decision who I come out to or not come out to. So I think there's the different kind of cultural context need to be taken into consideration when we talk to somebody who's talking about their own sexual identity or gender identity.
Thank you. I just had a question actually about, it's my own personal question, the role of religion in this. Do you think religion helps or does it hinder people's coming out experiences? I don't know what we think about that. So that's a very subjective question. So Rahni, I don't know if you want to come in on that. The role of religion.
Yeah, I was itching to come.
We've got 23 minutes.
Wow. Okay. Where do I start? I think religion has a lot to answer for. Yeah, I think coming out and trying to grapple with religion, if you've been taught scripture by someone else and you haven't read it yourself and you haven't critiqued it yourself, it doesn't help, because someone telling you what you're doing is completely against the scriptures, because that's what the scripture says. But when you start interrogating and looking at it yourself, it's a whole new world. You know, in terms of my faith, my journey with faith has been really challenging. Coming out, I didn't want anything to do with it. Sikhi, forget it. No way. They're going to hate me. They're going to kill me. No way. But it took time. You know, it took time for me to find books that were in English. You know, I don't read Punjabi. You know, I know one or two words in Punjabi to read that I can work out, but I speak Punjabi, but I don't read it. Yeah. So I had to find books that were in English to actually understand, well, what does the scriptures say? You know, and meet people to learn from them. Well, what does the scripture say? Does it talk to me? And it does. You know, it doesn't oppress me. However, people who interpret the scriptures will oppress me, will tell me that it's wrong what I'm doing. But that's not what the scriptures say to me. So I think religion has a lot to play, but it's how it's been enforced by individuals. And in majority of the times, it's men. That's my experience, yeah? It's men enforcing particular laws, particular ways that they say it's wrong what you're doing. But you need to have a look at it yourself and kind of interrogate it, because for some of us, faith is really important. It's our journey, it's our value system, it's what we based on, who we are. Our identity is part of that. For some of us, it isn't, and that's fine. But for the ones that it is, you know, let's embrace it, learn about it. You know, it shouldn't oppress us. Religion shouldn't oppress anyone, but it's who is telling you. You know, it's the person who is preaching that particular way of being. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, these are sort of personal experiences. So, I mean, your views probably, you know, that's your viewpoint, isn't it? So it's valid. Does anybody else want to, Osman, did you have a view on religion?
Yeah, I want to just say, wow, Rahni, that's what a response. That's exactly how I would say it as well. That, you know, it's your, you know, if you want to focus on a faith or a religion, do your research, learn about it, read about it. The reality is, people that are LGBTQ have existed for centuries. I mean, in terms of the Muslim culture, I mean, I can show you poetry, pictures. You know, you just need to do that research and not listen to, like Rahni said, it tends to be sort of older men who dictate, and just do your own research. And that's what faith is about. You know, it's everybody's own individual personal journey. So thank you so much, Rahni. I really enjoyed that response.
And perhaps, Matt, you could say some words at this point about your relationship with Naz, about the sort of role that religion played in that, and what your perspective was as a partner.
Yes, certainly. I mean, you know, Naz was from a very conservative Muslim family. You know, I was born into what I'd call a non-practicing Church of England family. You know, went to church, we had Bible stories and illustrated Bible books at home and stuff. I think, you know, from Naz's family perspective, particularly his parents, you know, they were very strict and very traditional in their interpretation of their faith. But, you know, what I've had to learn since is really the fact that even in the way that they talk to me, they often got culture and religion mixed up together. Whereas, you know, many people have come to our charity for support afterwards. You know, some people will cite that it's a religious interpretation or a religious reason for why their family are behaving that way. And you know, in another family from the same religious background, the individual might actually say it's a cultural reason why their parents are reacting in that way. And I think really the way I see it, it's and you know, not everyone would agree with this, but ultimately I think it's really it comes down to the interpretation of how that family sees either their tradition, their family values, the honor, their culture, their religion, because it's that interpretation is the thing that changes from family to family. You know, why is it that two families can read the same religious text, can follow the same religion, but they interpret it in very different ways? You know, are they influenced by the people in their family? Are they influenced by their local community? Are they influenced by the TV channel or the political ideology that they sign up to? Are they do they think that way because of the media consumption that they have? Do they think that way because of their parents and their parental views that they're either adhering to or rebelling against? So I think what's important for me is if it is interpretation, then that's a learned behavior. And if it's a learned behavior, then there is some hope that we can try and unlearn that behavior so that parents and family members can try and learn a different way of thinking. Because ultimately, you know, we can't change religion because it's already written down. You know, what we can do is influence the interpretation that hopefully can evolve over years or decades within communities to actually becoming more accepting and more aware that there are more, that the spectrum of this human species exists on a spectrum. It's not just a binary this or this. It's actually a beautiful spectrum that we need to learn more about, research and celebrate, and actually do something with that information, which is to accept one another for the differences that we have.
Thanks, Matt. Can I just come to Sabrina at this point? Sabrina, what's been your experience of religion and your son's journey?
Let me tell you and be honest, may not be what everybody would like to hear, but I'm an atheist, and I'm a big believer in saying that nothing comes before my family. Every child of mine has been important, and if I have given attention to Sherwin a bit more, it's because I'm like every other parent that becomes fearful at the start. But then while I do this journey with him, I come to realize I don't have anything to fear. My child doesn't fear anything because I am there, I'm strong, and he's gained strength from me together. So basically in my life, religion doesn't play a part, in my son's life neither. But I am still respectful of all other religions, and I agree with all of you that it's the interpretation, that does a lot. I don't think any religion propagates hate. I don't want to think of it like that, but that's what they do with religion, a lot of people. And I don't think it's fair. I think we are all human beings. As an ally, I feel I'm part of this LGBTQI. When it comes to I put it as ally. I am part of this community, and you don't look down on us. Just don't.
I love the way you've got your own abbreviation of the A there, Sabrina. Brilliant. And just some sort of reflection from the Sikh perspective. I mean, from the Sikh tradition, we don't really have any, we have in the Guru Granth Sahib, which doesn't talk, disparagingly against the LGBTQI community. But there's a contrast there between the religion and the culture, the Punjabi culture. So I just want to make that distinction where very often it's culture that's problematic. And not necessarily religion. Did anybody else want to come in on the point about religion? Or should we move on to the next question? Raise your hands, panel, if you do, or forever hold the breath. Cool, excellent. Shraddha, over to you for the next question.
Great, thank you. So much food for thought. I will pick up a few points that have been touched on, and we touched upon it with the first question that Kulbir touched on with the Western idea as well. And I want to talk about racism. Let's throw it in there. I'm picking up a question that says, could the panelists talk a little bit more around racism, whether that makes it harder for communities to come out? Well, for us to come out, does that impact your experience? It's an open question. I will. Does anybody want to come out? Speak to this?
Well, I'm going to just say that Rahni earlier mentioned her experiences that, it was difficult when you're out in the scene, because sometimes it isn't all rainbows and unicorns. Sometimes you do come across people who are racist within the queer community, and it's that place where a lot of our Hidayah members have experienced racism and Islamophobia as well, because they can't, for many people in the queer community, they see religion and faith as a paradox, that you can't be one or the other. And sometimes I've found myself having to explain myself to people in gay nightclubs. I mean, I shouldn't need to do that. I should just be able to go out and enjoy myself and not have to tell everybody about my whole life story. So yeah, I think it's important that, and that is a form of racism and Islamophobia. And I think it's important that, that we create spaces where people can feel comfortable and not be questioned or interrogated every time they turn up to go to a venue. Yeah, I think that's me.
Thank you. Rahni, you were coming in?
Yeah, what else can I add to that? I think that still exists. When I was out on the scene, when I was coming out, early 90s, I still wore my salwar kameez going out clubbing, and it was that constant thing. Why are you coming here? Why are you dressed like that? Where have you been? So I'd had to give them a whole list of all the clubs I'd been to in the particular area, and only then I could come in. And sometimes I couldn't go in, especially if I was with a group of Black women, African and Asian women, a whole group of us, we would just be turned away. So at that time, we ended up setting up our own lesbian, bisexual, trans women space in terms of Black identity, politically Black women coming together, having nights out, because there wasn't a space. And over time, some of us have been around the block a few times, know that in the UK there were many black lesbian and black LGBT groups that existed in the 80s to the 90s, and all of a sudden Pride becomes, you know, very commercial. We're okay, we're getting a lot of freedom, we've got this and this. So a lot of those groups kind of ended up closing, and those groups don't necessarily exist. And it's quite interesting to see certain groups kind of setting themselves up all over again, because racism still is there. It didn't disappear. It just, people found it a different way to do it. Instead of doing it and saying it in front of your face, they would do it in other ways. So I think racism still is there. It just plays out differently in terms of, if you look at dating sites, you know, who are they asking for? Are they asking for a person to look a certain way, a certain community? When you go somewhere and you're from a particular community, how are they sexualizing you? You know, if you're a gay man, if you're a young gay man or a young lesbian, you know, young queer person out on the scene, how are they viewing you, you know, in terms of how you look and who you are? All those things play a part, and racism is still there, whether we like it or not. It still exists, I would say. That's my experience.
Yes, thank you. Pavan?
Yeah, I think what Osman and Rahni have mentioned, actually, that I can relate to some of my own experiences of when I came to the UK. But I also remember the documentary in BBC Three about Queer Britain, which touches upon these subjects, actually, that how racism is prevalent in the LGBT community. But I want to throw a kind of a slightly two different ideas here as well. And one is actually, which often when we talk about internalized homophobia, I think there's an internalized racism within the community as well. And here's the kind of thought about, there's a question, I mean, a lot of people talk about that people not feeling comfortable with going out within the same community, with people in the same community. There's a lot of kind of values within the community coming from the prejudices and biases which came from the same culture as well. And then people looked for more recognition and identity from different culture and race as well. So many people felt more comfortable going out with the white British guy, for example, than South Asian guy, because there's this kind of promotion of individuality, which was missing in their own culture, was accepted and promoted and seen. And that was very valuable as well. So there's this another side of the kind of the story about this, where people naturally felt that they were more seen in different cultures as well. So, and the different cultures did accommodate them as well. So, so my partner is from a different culture as well, different race, and there are other people who actually build that kind of relationship, and that brought a lot of strength, values, and kind of interesting learning from each other as well. But we can't deny the thing that they are still there, that there's a still long way to go. Even in a culture like Britain, there's a clear evidence suggesting the racism is there. But then there are other stories as well. So there's no generalization when I'm saying that there's a kind of different stories. And like we talk about everything, each story is on their own and unique in some ways.
Thank you. And I think you really hit the nail on the head there by saying there's still a long way to go. I think it would ideally be a great place to be where we don't have to come out, it's a non-issue, but also where we don't have to face racist filters or it's just my preference or things like that in all the spaces we go into. Anybody else want to jump in on that, or should we head towards a final question before we start closing? No? All right. Kulbir, shall I give it to you for a final question?
Yeah, sure. Just a question or a statement rather on the chat. So it's a comment that says, a suggestion for people who are trying to come out: don't be scared. Your parents will ultimately have to come around. You know your parents better than anyone else. So do things accordingly. What do we think about that? This statement about being brave. And I guess a few of us, like Pavan made the point before about, you know, you can be brave, but there's an element of safety involved and community and mental health. So I guess it's more of a statement more than anything else, if anybody wants to come in on that.
Can I perhaps say something? It is heavily biased to our own story, but I would say that this perhaps isn't the answer everyone wants, but I'd say I'd be biased towards saying that the default position should be not to come out to parents and then work forwards from there. I think it's really important to understand the immense emotional impact it can have on oneself if they don't react in the way that you hope they do react. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it is really important to be brave. So I do agree with that point, but I also agree it's really important that sometimes coming out, it can lead to unpredictable consequences. And I think not thinking all of those aspects through, or not preparing yourself when you come out, or not telling your friends that you're going to come out to your parents, and having, in some cases, an escape plan. I mean, it all sounds very scary, and in some cases it sadly is. But I'd say if you are seriously worried about how your parents would react to you coming out, then it's better to be prepared, and to have something like an escape plan, and to have a phone number you can call of a friend who knows what you're about to do, to have everything prepared in advance. So if things don't go the way that you hope they do, then at least you're prepared in some ways that's going to allow you to get out of that situation quickly. Yeah. I'd love to be in a world where I didn't have to say that, but sadly, the people that come to our charity, that's often the situation that they're in. So it's more common than people probably think.
Did you want to come in on that, Osman? Sorry, about this point about being brave and coming out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that your safety comes first, and then also to be able to, have people around you that can support you, whether it be emotionally, financially, if that's the case. For me today, Rahni, you've been so brave. The fact that you came out in the community 30 years ago, that's so powerful. And you're like my role model now. It's just with the stuff that you've said, and it's really sort of empowered me and made me realize that, there's people out there that have, who still have come out of the whole process and still smiling and standing.
Thanks, Osman. And just, I guess, as a sort of final, so we're concluding the webinar now, but I just want to ask the panel, sort of no more than one sentence. What advice would you give to people thinking about coming out? Just in one sentence. Somebody take the floor before I pick on somebody.
I'll take the floor.
Excellent.
Thank you, Osman. I would say make sure you got your support network. It's so important that you've got the support network around you. I think we've all touched upon it. Your safety is more important than anything else. And then you decide.
Excellent. Thanks for them 3 sentences. Sorry. Pavan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, just kind of very similar as well. It's your own journey. Don't feel pressurized.
Matt, do you want to go next?
Be the person you were born to be.
Wow, I love that.
That's beautiful. Osman, do you want to go next?
Just to say that your feelings are valid, and that just love yourself and be the honest self that you can, safely.
Brilliant. Thanks, Osman. Lokesh, do you want to come in on that point?
I would say be yourself and take care of yourself.
Cool. Excellent. Have you all answered that? You've all answered that question. Have you been
next? Yeah.
Matt, do you want to go next?
I've been.
Oh, you've been? Okay, excellent. So that concludes the webinar. Just to say that we're concluding, so the webinar ends now, but it's on Twitter. So if you want to follow the Twitter chat, I think sort of Sarbat are tweeting this, so get involved in the conversation there. And if you want to contact Sarbat, our contact details are on the website. So drop us an email or follow us on our social channels. Shraddha, did you want to sort of say anything at the end, just to conclude?
I wanted to pass it on to Sabrina because I don't think she got to conclude.
Oh,
but
apologies.
I think with all our power, I think we are looking for more.
I kept the best to last. Sabrina,
Yeah.
over to you.
Thank you so much for the last time. So to me, it would be only do it when you don't feel pressured, and you're financially stable, financially independent and emotionally stable.
Great.
Thank you. And I will add to what everybody's saying by saying there's always various networks. If you wanted to reach out to Sarbat, we can signpost you to others if there are other places that might be better suited for your particular needs. There's always friends around. There's a lot collaborating together here on this day today. But there's always a friend, so don't ever feel like you're alone. Would be what I'd give away to everybody listening. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, everybody listening as well, and everybody on the panel. Can
I just thank the partners very quickly?
Yeah.
So thanks to Hidayah, thanks to the Nazamat Foundation, thanks to Sarbat, thanks to Jin. So as Shraddha says, there's lots of community out there for everybody. So search us out on social media and connect with us.
Yeah, and thank you to UK Punjab Heritage Foundation, Association for lending us this beautiful webinar platform. I think that allows us to reach so many more people than we would and in our usual meetings. And Amandeep is a great partner to work with. So thank you very much for that. Excellent. I will close soon.
Thank you. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.